Hi, this is Leland Chi, creative executive at Lucasfilm, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
It's true what they say. You are the chosen one. Join me. Together we can change the balance of the universe.
You are growing stronger, my son.
Am I, Father?
Vanity, however, is getting the better of you.
How so?
You have done what is forbidden.
The chains. The chains are the easy part. It's what goes on in here that's hard. Don't you see, child? You are alone now.
I don't need you anymore.
Ahsoka. Ahsoka, listen to me. He has done something to you. Snap out of it. This isn't you, Ahsoka.
Isn't it? I feel more like myself than I ever have.
Hey, Snips.
What's going on?
Not much. It's good to see you.
This is Ashley Eckstein, Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. This is your twice-a-week spoiler-free place for Star Wars community and conversation. I'm your host, Dan Zare, delighted to talk Star Wars with each and every one of you. Since May of 2013, whether you are a fan of Star Wars films, Disney Plus live action and animation, books, comics, collectibles, or Star Wars experiences at the Disney theme parks, on Coffee with Kenobi, you are among friends as we virtually share a cup of coffee or whatever beverage you would like to enjoy while talking about this galaxy far, far away. Thank you to the official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi, MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. Check out coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel for a no-cost, no-obligation quote, and let them know Coffee with Kenobi and Dan Zare sent you. On today's show, we talk about the second part of the famous Mortis trilogy from Star Wars The Clone Wars. This episode is titled Altar of Mortis, and I am joined by CWK Cast and Colby Mead. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi. Hello, friends. It is time once again to dive back, or actually more, not back, but for the first time on Coffee with Kenobi, we are exploring the Mortis trilogy. We are on the second episode of the Mortis trilogy. This is, of course, from season 3 of Star Wars The Clone Wars. It is the 16th episode, and I've got two wonderful, insightful guests who are going to join me to talk about the second episode. First, from the Colby Cast, Mr. Colby Mead.
Hello, Dan. Thank you so much for having me back. I always love joining you and really looking forward to our conversation about this specific topic.
I am too. You are going to be a great person to learn from, as is our next guest. You know him from the Rebel Base card. There are many, many different iterations depending on where Greg is deciding how he's going to label the breakfast food or whatever. But you know him also from Ion Cannon, the amazing CWK Cast. Greg, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. And like Colby, I'm excited to talk about these episodes, which are a weak spot in my fandom. I haven't experienced them as much as some others. So thanks for the opportunity.
You are so welcome. I'm looking forward to learning from you as well. So I've said this before last few weeks. This was the first time I've rewatched these since they first aired. So it's almost like they're brand new to me. And boy, oh boy, when you watch these, you've got to watch them more than once. And I don't say that lightly. Sometimes, people say, I got to watch them more than once to really get it all. And I don't always feel that way. But for these, 100%. So we'll do what we always do when we start our reviews. We're going to give one word to describe the episode and overall thoughts. So I'll go in reverse order this time. Greg, we'll start with you. One word and overall thoughts on Altar of Mortis.
Well, and I'll just note, I'm very much in the same boat as you. I watched Clone Wars as it came out live Friday nights, I think it was. But I haven't revisited a lot, and that was a really busy time in my life. So I enjoyed it. I bear no ill will to it, but it is exciting to revisit. My one word is allegory. And it is representative of how I never know how to watch this episode. Is it pure allegory, pure symbolism, and this kind of mystical realm where nothing is what it seems and it all has some deeper meaning? Or is it literal and it is what it seems, and we should understand these events as being that way? So I lean a little more into the allegorical, that there's something going on here and I'm seeking to understand it. And I will continue to rewatch these episodes and be thinking about what those symbols are and how this impacts our wider galaxy. And so my overall thought is that they are great, but they are challenging, and they are, not I'm just having a drink on a Friday night watching a cartoon. They are, really mythological and deep. And so I'm excited to get to unpack that with you fine gentlemen.
Definitely. Colby, what about you? One word and overall thoughts on Ultra Mortis.
So my word is going to be fabulous, but not in the, oh, this was fabulous sense. More like this is rooted in fable and myth type of fabulous. That's the sense I'm going for. Because, Greg, just like you, I'm going to keep the allegory train going. I have no idea what to make of these episodes. Are they real? Are they not? Did this happen? Did this not? But there's lessons to be learned. It's myth. It's mythological. So they're teaching us something. And I feel very strongly that this episode does that. I feel like this of the Mortis arc, this episode here is the bridge, right? From the beginning to the end. So lots of things happen, but I sort of feel like it's more character driven. We learn a lot about the characters. The son is here and he's trying to steal and kill and destroy. We see some inner demons coming out with Ahsoka. We've got Anakin doing the Anakin thing and Obi-Wan constantly looking at the bigger picture. And that's sort of like where that's them in a nutshell, right? These characters. So I think that we can learn from them. And I think that that's what this episode does, is it teaches almost like a mythological type of lesson.
Very much so. If I was reviewing this from a culinary perspective, I would say it's onion, because the more you peel, the more it stinks, because you just can't quite figure it out. But that's not my word. My word is nuance, because I feel like something that the son does in the first episode that is very much on full exhibit here is, look, it's not quite as simple as you make it. There's so much more going on. Like you, Greg, the allegory is very, very much in play. I was more convinced than ever after viewing the first episode. This is all allegory. This is all some sort of spiritual thing that Anakin is going through. But that goes away as soon as this one starts. Now I feel like, no, it's not. Maybe it was, but now maybe it isn't. And as I've said many times, I like questions more than answers. I like not knowing, but I feel like we get a little bit more here than possibly originally thought. The opening remark is, he who surrenders hope surrenders life. I raised this question last time. Who is the voice of these cards? Right? Who is the authentic voice of these cards? Is this a reliable narrator? Is this something that we can trust? Or is this just simply... I proposed earlier, it was the thesis of every individual episode. Greg, what do you think?
It's a really good question. And it's funny, when you pose it to me, I was like, oh, I liked it much better when you asked Dennis and Father Jim, because I didn't have to have an answer. But I do like that question, because I think part of my kind of initial response is link it so much to the Tom Kane opening kind of newsreel voice that it feels like him, but they aren't that. They are something separate, and it's a very different mode. They are, I hear them most commonly referred to as fortune cookies, and that's often what they are, some kind of aphorism, some kind of takeaway. And in that spectrum, this one stands apart because it is about a person, right? It's a he who surrenders hope, surrenders life. And that made it feel a lot more directly tied into this episode than some other ones have in the past. It's a real big swing on my part to say this, but I will say that one of the things I think about is I go back to the Journal of the Wills, right? And this original concept that we know was in George's mind when he played out Star Wars. And there's some part of me, the way the wills kind of come and go in the From a Certain Point of View anthology and other places, like there's still a part of Star Wars mythology. And I want them to almost be that, right? Like some bit of wisdom of passed down to us from the galaxy far, far away, the lesson of these stories. And in that regard, I think, if this is less and less by the time we get to season 3, if it's a kid's show to teach kids our morals and our values, which is how George always thought of Star Wars, this really feels like a lesson from the wills, from George, to tell everybody, like, hang on to that hope, clutch on to that hope.
Mm-hmm. Wow, really good. Colby, you want to add anything to that, or maybe add sort of your own perspective?
Well, I was going to go the thesis route, and I'm saying route, not route, because we're here with a New Englander here. You got to say route, not route.
That's fair. And he's dressed for the role as well.
And he is, absolutely. I also heard you bring up the thesis idea with Father Jimmy and Dennis last week, and I like that very much. And I never had really looked at these fortune cookies as a thesis, but I can totally get behind that idea. But now I'm second guessing myself because Greg did such a good job of sort of giving us a new idea. But I'm going to stick with the thesis because the theme of hope is really, really, really a big idea in this episode. And last week or last episode, you talked about your students, Dan, and how the papers they write, all those supporting points have to go back to that thesis. And it's almost in this episode with Anakin delivering a line near the end, it's almost like heavy-handed how much they're emphasizing hope here. So I like the idea of thesis. Plus, whenever I hear the word thesis, I think of Partagaz from Andor saying "thesis, please," which just tickles me to death every time I think of him. So yeah, I like the thesis.
So I do too, and then sometimes I don't, because I think, again, I try to think about who is the narrator. This is clearly sort of a different ideological construct breaking this down. But when you surrender hope, you surrender life. So you can give up on something. You can be void of hope. But how do you surrender life? I mean, to me, it's more like, are you really living if you're not living for anything? So then I ask the question, what is the son living for? Is he even alive? He is. And the more I look at this and think about these episodes, I feel like, gentlemen, these three characters, we hear them referred to often as the Mortis gods. Well, maybe they're gods along the ways that Thor is a god in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's immortal until he isn't, right? Loki is immortal until he isn't. So they transcend the normal life cycle of a normal human being, but they're not. I feel like the Mortis gods are so flawed. I'm particularly drawn to the flaws of the daughter, and then I'm really drawn to the flaws of the father himself. I mean, we're not going through this linearly. I think there's a lot of great stuff to talk about. But I feel like this is probably the most interesting topic, because if they are flawed, then to me, my thesis is, well, the father, and he says this a lot, he should have never brought Anakin in the first place. And is it his fault that Revenge of the Sith happens? What do you think, guys?
That's I mean, you're right. You're cutting right to the quick and getting into the deep parts of this. And I really liked your comparison to like Thor, because part of how they set up those characters, at least in the cinematic universe, after listening to your comic book episodes, I know I'm not in your league on comic book, but in the films for Thor, they set up kind of that the gods are just something that we aren't ready to comprehend. And that relationship fits really well between our Jedi and, in the first episode is called Overlords, as I recall, right? And so these are overlord, they're this level of power that we're not ready to understand. And so in a primitive sense, they appear like gods, even though I think you're right not to put like a benevolence or a kind of Christian God framework on that in any way. What strikes me, I'm going to dodge your question about the father by saying, like, I thought this episode really helped define the two children in the selfless and selfish categories. And there are these classic versions of George Lucas talking about his mythology where he's like, that's the whole deal. That's all it comes down to, right? The light side, the dark side, it just boils down. Are you acting for yourself or are you acting for others? And I found that really compelling here to see that kind of brought to the surface more. And we see the son actually has a very Kylo Ren line when he says, like, we'll destroy the Sith and the Jedi and we'll do something greater. And I was like, wait, he's referencing Kylo Ren the way he references all those other dark side characters. He's prefiguring Kylo Ren. So, that to me means that if the father is supposed to balance out those impulses, then it is a kind of mythology of the cosmos, but a mythology of the individual, right? The father is our own consciousness pulling those two forces within us. We all want to act selflessly at times, and we all want to act selfishly at times. I mean, we're all displaying beautiful collections of us acting selfishly behind us. So how can we make sure that we regulate ourselves and our own impulses to have that balance? And when we fail for ourselves. We go through a dark time. When the father fails, to your question, maybe the universe goes through a dark time.
And if the father is supposed to be like the one who brings balance in the middle, then it should be equal parts dark and light, Rob. Probably, if we're again deciding that balance in the force means they have to be equal, because the son says you can't have light without dark. Like, you need me. I would think if I were the son, that I would feel like is the father favoring the daughter, because everything he does is working against the son, and yet the daughter, who is the good, the light, she doesn't really do a lot besides give him a weapon. And so there's a myth of redemptive violence suddenly where no, this is the only thing that can stop him. But she doesn't say stop him. She says control him. I believe this is the only thing that can control my brother. So the only way to control the dark side is through the threat of violence. I don't know. I'm just sort of throwing a lot of stuff on the wall here, but that's why this is so nuanced, because it is so unclear what is the right way to go. And yet somehow I think Anakin is more poised than anybody. Well, Obi-Wan, of course, is Mr. Poise. Let's not get crazy. Of course he is. But I think it's really, really interesting. Colby, we're throwing there's a lot of stuff in this Star Wars buffet for you to pick and choose from. Go anything that kind of jumps out at you.
You know, the thing that I'm sort of glad you guys didn't touch on, even though, Dan, you mentioned the daughter, is something that she says to Obi-Wan, which is almost like she's defending her brother when she says that his nature is selfish, and she says he can't help it.
Which she says twice in the episode.
She does. She does. And I find that wildly inconsistent with what she does next, which is take him to go get a weapon to basically control him. Mm-hmm. Why does she feel that needs to happen if he's just acting in his nature? And if we're to take that at face value, then she needs to let him do what he's doing, because she's doing what she's doing. She's acting in her nature. He's acting in his nature. And the father is there letting the will of the force play out. So why is there any action that needs to be taken at all? So I don't know, does she really believe that? Are we to believe that? And I find that actually quite hopeless if this is his nature and she's okay with him acting out in his nature. Well, his nature is bringing death and destruction. So I guess it goes back to the Ouroboros of this arc, I guess, which is very circular. And it goes back to the same place where we started, almost like the characters do near the end of the arc. So.
Right. And if you're just supposed to let it play out, because don't be upset with him. It's his nature. So maybe it's like he's going to do it. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not endorsing it, but it's like hate the sin, love the sinner kind of a thing.
Sure.
I don't know. What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, well, I think you both pulled out good lines there, and I would add to the mix when the father is angered at the son in the first part of their first confrontation in the episode. He says, "Vanity, however, is getting the better of you," and so that made me really think about what exactly would the difference between selfishness and vanity be. Right? Because if you're acting in your own interest and you're very selfish, that's not exactly vain, right? You kind of have to have a emotional investment in yourself in some way to have vanity on top of that, at least how I parse those words. And so is it that he can't deny his own nature, but when he, to use the 70s phrase, is high on his own supply or, high on himself, is that then like, that's what pushes him beyond, is that you can't then actually, you hurt the balance and get even further out of balance because of that. And some of his plottings here, I think, are presented, Sir Gawain in The Green Knight and some other literature is all about the idea of like a cycle over and over again. And this is a little bit of what Loki is playing at this season. And I just caught that Colby got a Loki reference in, so I have to compete. So it's playing with this idea that if you're on a recursive track where you're going over and over again, then there's often the literary moment is when you change that track enough that suddenly it's going to go differently. And that makes me wonder, is the vanity this time the thing that's pushing this beyond the normal back and forth of the pattern? And the landscape of Mortis reinforced that, because last episode it was the cyclical, the light, the dark, the dying, and now it's darkness. It's very Lord of the Rings, very Mordor, I thought, in its version of that. So I think maybe we are seeing that things have already progressed out of balance too far.
Even with the tower, right? That they are always. It's that was very purposefully designed to be reminiscent of the tower that Saruman is in the Two Towers. The beginning of this, I absolutely love the recruitment. When Anakin has that vision and he looks at a mirror image of himself, it's the sun, and Anakin says something interesting. He says, "You must know I would never willingly turn to the dark side." Willingly. To me, that's like putting a caveat in there in a way. And then that's when the sun says, how simple you make this whole concept of light and dark, as if there can be one without the other. And then again, it's this whole thing about, you and I can restore balance. I would love to know, is when someone who is Sith, or he's not Sith, he would probably laugh at me for saying that, but he's the dark side. If someone is team dark side, hashtag, do they, for them, when they say, help me get balance, is that their way of saying, I'm going to get rid of good and we're just going to be dark, and then we don't have to worry about balance because it's just us? Or do they really in their own twisted minds think, let's bring order by getting rid of anything that is not for us, which would be very selfish. And this is sort of an eternal question that transcends this episode, but I feel like these episodes really make it more than just a surface throwaway line. I feel like there's more anchoring of this concept throughout these three episodes themselves.
I think if we remember what we've been told about the Sith, selfishness obviously is there at the center of all of it, and power, control. They clearly feel that they're in the right. We're thinking, like, I think of Thanos. He's such a great villain. He thinks he's right, and doesn't matter how he's gonna get to his goal. He thinks he's right. He's gonna do it. Sith thinking is very much the same way, and we see the son talking about that. He wants to. I'm sorry. I'm not going to break the rule. We're not going to talk about the next episode. I know
there's another episode. How exciting!
But his main objective is to rule and to control, right? And he's okay with doing that through that power. And he's not going to be burdened by the label of Sith or Jedi. So that really reveals his inner core as a dark side being or dark side user, because it's a very foundational pillar, right, of dark side thinking. And I agree with you, though. That first scene is a brilliant way of showing that, and it's Anakin seeing himself first. And can I also just pause and just give a shout out to the vocal performances in this episode? Are just Sam Witwer always kills it, but again, he goes from 0 to 100 in a split second, doesn't he? And it's just so excellent. And then of course Ashley Eckstein, and Ahsoka, especially when she's scary Ahsoka, is just tremendous. Anyway, so sorry about that rabbit trail, but yeah, Sith power control. They think they're right, and they're willing to do whatever. They take the easy way to do it, like Yoda has told us over and over.
That's right. And the son gets really mad. He's so mad he turns back into that gargoyle version of himself, and he says, "The Sith, we will destroy the Sith and the Jedi." He wants to destroy the Sith. I think he just wants it to be Team him. When Ahsoka's kidnapped, when she's in that tower, and that small purple creature who's never named, ultimately we realize it's the son. It's always so it's almost very Old Testament, isn't it? Like when you turn into the small creature that has a very sinister way about them. They try to come across as like relatable or personable, and then the creature talks about it's impossible to escape. And I mentioned this on the live show this week. But when I first watched it, I thought he's talking about Ahsoka. Like, you can't escape me. I'm the son. We're on Mortis, blah, blah. Then I started to realize, no, he's talking about himself because, again, he is selfish. It's impossible for me to escape this planet. That's why I need your master, because he is powerful. He's the chosen one, which clearly the son believes, and we know to be true. It's not Luke. Sorry, Dave Filoni said it's not Luke. I wish it were true, but it's not. And so then he bites her. And did he need to do that to make it happen? Probably. But it's this wonderful vampiric thing, which if only we had a literature professor on the show. Oh, wait, I've only got 2 wishes left. Greg, what do you think about that? I feel like that was really symbolic and really interesting.
Yeah, I actually, it's so funny you mentioned that. I'm just helping a student edit a paper on Nosferatu, specifically the first film adaptation of Dracula, and I do think that it has to turn bestial, right, in this episode, not in Dracula. That when the conflict comes up, that's when the 2 children turn into their beast forms, right? Like they're letting their true essence. And I'm not going to pretend to be as good at unpacking the Griffin as you all were on the previous episode, but there's something majestic about the daughter's beast and something very monstrous about the son's bat-like creature. Yeah. And so the fact that it takes a bite, something that is inhuman in that regard and less than human, subhuman, I think is meaningful there. And I want to echo what Colby said about, like, when Ashley leans into that performance, I just see her in the voice booth having the best time and doing such a nice kind of swerve on it. But it's really, to me, at least as a viewer, it's really unsettling, because this is Ahsoka. This is Snips. This is, our kind of beating, pulsing heart in this time period. And she's turned dark so easily and within that. To pick up as a last point on your idea of escape there, he says, he wants to escape, or there is no escape, as you pointed out. That to me is an echo, his version of it is his nature, right? He can't escape these actions because this is who he is. He is somebody who is trapped by his own machinations and will always be monstrous within that. And that is vampires, right? I mean, Twilight made vampires cute and sparkly, but really, vampires are monstrous, and they're trapped in this life. And to be infected by a vampire means you're going to have a waking life, right? It's a dreadful fate. So I think that is part of what his nature is he's trapped here in this role.
I love it. Yeah, so I think last week I said Elizabethan era, but I think I meant Victorian era for Bram Stoker's Dracula. I'm so fascinated by that bite sequence. I love the novel Dracula. I've taught it probably 25, 30 times. I know it very, very well. And one of the things that's interesting to me about what Dracula does is he subverts the culture. He subverts what is appropriate, what is contextually how things should play out. That bite, look, I want to be really, really, really clear on this. Dracula's parents, if you're listening to this with your kids, fast forward about 30 seconds. Dracula is all about sex. Okay, it's this transmission of bodily fluids through the bite itself, right? That's not going on here. That is 1,000% not going on in this episode. There's nothing sexual about the episode. However, I think it's been 30 seconds. Welcome back. That bite right there, that becomes an infusion of what is evil, and it goes into Ahsoka, and it changes her chemistry. It kind of makes her older than she is. There's kind of a weird, seductive, perverse playfulness about her. Again, it's not supposed to be like, well, okay. Here's what it is. I think Anakin's biggest nightmare, probably in the context of this series, is that he will fail Snips. He will fail Ahsoka and not be a good teacher, not be a good mentor to her. I think one of her biggest fears is that she will not live up to who he is, or that she will disappoint him. Now, it's not super, super important in their overall arcs, but it is an underlying factor. So when the son does this, he makes Ahsoka suddenly, I compared it on the live show to when you're in halt. If you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, you're not supposed to argue with your spouse because you're not being your best self. This is the worst version of who Ahsoka can or could be. And it's scary for Anakin, but it's more scary for Ahsoka because she loses control and he takes that away from her. And I think it's such a huge violation of who Ahsoka is and who Ahsoka wants to be. That's why this is really, really scary. And then for us as an audience, she even takes on this Harley Quinn. Sometimes Ashley X9's performance echoes, or is it Arlene Sorkin who played Harley Quinn, I believe, in the Batman the Animated Series? Hold on, we're going to genuflect because I think that's the best animated series ever made. And so I think it's really important that it's a bite that transmits this, because he's infecting her and infecting all the purity of who she is. And that's very, very scary. He takes away her voice and her control and forces her to be who she isn't, just to manipulate Anakin. And that's why he's so selfish.
It's so disturbing. And I'm really glad that we're talking about this, because it's so confusing. That scene, and I'm always asking myself, why does he have to bite her? Now I know, because you smart gentlemen have explained it to me. But what I get from it is it's so disturbing and so gross, and he is violating her personal space. He's violating her physical body. It's not just like a wave of a hand, right? We're not just, or force lightning. This is teeth sinking into her skin, and it is a reflection on his nature. Again, you brought it up, and his nature is quite disturbing. So I don't know. It's a disease.
It's an infection. Like this evil, this dark side is an infection, and is played out as a virus.
Yeah, and I don't know that there's anything else but a bite that could really show us that in the way that it did. So, good job, director.
Yes. Okay. Well, so I will say the choreography with the fight sequence with Ahsoka fighting against Anakin, later Obi-Wan, is really, really terrific. But before we get to that, we're introduced to the dagger of Mortis, which, again, as we said at the top of the show, is something that can be used to control the sun. Greg or Colby, either of you, I don't care who goes first, whichever of you feels particularly called to do so. Why is there a dagger of Mortis? I mean, obviously you need some sort of a fun thing. I'm surprised we don't have a dagger of Mortis at Galaxy's Edge you can purchase, because I would buy one. We all would probably. But why do we need a dagger? Why do we need this to keep everybody in balance? I mean, I guess that's the altar of Mortis. This kind of Minecraft segment of the show where it's down there, and it is obviously something that can be used to kill these three very, very powerful figures. But I'm so interested in the concept of it and what it means, why they need to have it.
Go ahead, Dr. Cast, because I am also confused. I will just add that maybe they just needed something for Obi-Wan to do, and they also needed to introduce this artifact for a further use of it in the next
for
episode.
sure. But then you wonder, why does it exist?
I have the same question. I wonder the same thing.
Boy, I tried. I held the line and did not watch the third, and so everything you're saying there is a third, and then that there's plot points. It's intriguing to me because I really have no memory of it. I did remember there were three. It is a really interesting point, and folding those questions together. So there's a dagger that exists that was created by somebody, one would presume, as a means of control, and then it takes the position in the title, right? I mean, the first episode being Overlords makes a lot of sense to me, and then this one being the Altar of Mortis, that is harder for me to figure out and to crack about why you would do this. And when the dagger is revealed, the father is quite angry that the daughter has shown it to these outsiders, and I think that might get back to Dan's original question of whose fault is it here, right? Like the father clearly blames the daughter for revealing the dagger, but he's the one who brought them all here, which gave them the opportunity. And it starts to very much feel like the kind of classic Greek mythology move of everybody trying to avoid a certain outcome, which means every action helps advance us towards that outcome. And I don't have a lot of answers about who controls it. It felt to me like it was the fathers, right? And so I would say that it probably is a part of the balance, right? That if it's the break glass in case of emergency, go down to the lava, open up the altar, and pull out the dagger. If you've lost control of, I suppose, either side, to the extent that balance is truly threatened and the whole galaxy will fail, then this is how we end that problem. I go back to the Overlords episode where I think it's Qui-Gon says this is a conduit of the Force, right? And so if this place has such a deep impact on what goes on in the traditional galaxy or the original galaxy, it seems to me that you have to have a fail-safe of that level, right? Where if all else fails, you just have to commit a violent act in this case and just prevent it from spreading back to that original galaxy. The one answer I'm sure of, because I've watched the internet speculate wildly, I don't think it's Abeloth, and I don't think it's the mother. I don't expect her to come in and be a part of Ahsoka. I love you, internet. I love all the things you come up with, but I think this is very much the mythology is the Trinity, and that is where we're going to continue to explore this group.
Love it. And I would say I will not say I love the internet. I will say I tolerate you, internet. I'm grateful that it has brought me these wonderful people into this awesome Star Wars community. I thought about this when you were both talking about this, and it feels sort of Old Testament in a way. I mean, Trinity certainly is New Testament, but an altar is used for sacrifice, right? To honor, to celebrate a god or an idea, a creed, which is a religious idea. Mandalorian is not a race; it's a creed. This is not Mandalorian, but on an altar, there's a sacrifice, and in the classic Old Testament sense, Abraham is asked to kill his son, as a test of his faith. In this example, there is a sacrifice, and it is by the daughter who is the light side, and she sacrifices herself to save her father, who is the one in the middle, not like the Bendu. I think the Bendu was not missing any pages in the middle manual. because if the father, who is the middle, if he's the one who creates the dagger, and I do think that makes the most sense, then I don't know. It's almost unfair to say that creating the dagger makes you evil, because a lightsaber is used for knowledge and defense, just like the Force, never for attack. So you have to do something as a failsafe. You know the sun is going to be dangerous. But I really think, because I kept thinking, why is this called Altar Mortis? Because there's a dagger? That's why. No, that big platform where everything happens, that suddenly becomes the altar because she becomes sacrificed. And I think it's really beautiful. Let's be honest, the daughter isn't much of a well-rounded character. She's pretty one note. The son is not. He's not, super multifaceted, but at least he voices his sort of, it isn't really struggled, and he's pretty sure about what he wants to do, but it's not until he gets more confidence. He incites all this anger and this conflict, as the daughter says, this conflict is making me stronger, isn't it? The father notices, you're much stronger now. I'm going to have to restrain you. And then the son feels threatened, sends his force lightning. Bad things happen. I'm going to jump around, though, a little bit, because at the end, when the daughter dies or is about to die, Ahsoka's dead. Like, Ahsoka is not metaphorically dead, or she's dead. She dies. And I had forgotten about this. We know that the Convor Morai, who looks a lot like the daughter, has followed Ahsoka around in the Clone Wars, in Rebels, in The Mandalorian, and of course, in her own titular series, Ahsoka. This is why. And I'd forgotten this, right? Set the stage for us. In fact, Colby, I'll have you kind of explain what it looks like, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts about kind of what happens.
With the resurrection of Ahsoka, you're talking about? So, I also questioned, and I didn't forget that she died. I remembered very well because I talked to my boys on the Colby Cast during Ahsoka. We referenced this because it was during the whole World Between World Anakin lesson, and we were discussing, is this real? Has Ahsoka died? Is she fighting for her life? And the point that she had died in the Clone Wars came up, and we were sort of divided, like, well, is she going to die all the time? Is this it's like a thing that we're going to go back to? But anyway, so there's no doubt about it. She has no eyes. Like, her eyes are completely white, and it's actually really terrifying. The daughter is laying off to the side, and she still has light. She's not, like, when she is gone, her light is gone, but she still has light, and she sort of points over at Ahsoka, and almost like sending a message, like, I can save her. Don't let my death be in vain. And I found it really interesting that, like, she could have just touched her, or they could have brought Ahsoka over to her, but the father, like, places Anakin in the middle and controls his movements and makes him the channel to get that force life, or that last of her force energy, if we want to call it that, to Ahsoka. And then Ahsoka, sort of jumps up and is alive again. And I found it quite funny, actually, because she has no memory of what just happened. And she's asking, like, what's going on? And Anakin just goes, nothing much. He just tells her, nothing much. Like, you didn't miss much. Don't worry. So I found it interesting. And I also find it interesting that we don't see Morai immediately. We won't discuss the next episode because it's against the rules. But we don't see, if you're going to be on the nose with this, like, you would see her off in the distance, right? And I think it's really a good storytelling choice not to show us immediately, because she sort of mysteriously arrives down the road. And I think that is really nice and subtle.
Beautiful. Excellent. Greg, I enjoy you having to follow that and not me. That's why I'm the host. That's just the only reason.
I really like the combination of both of your last comments. How, Dan, you made me think a lot more about the Altar Mortis in the title. The game I play on our show with every title of The Mandalorian in particular is I'm always like, but here's the 3 ways to interpret the title, whatever it is. And I think you pointed out that there is perhaps a secondary way to interpret the Altar Mortis. And you said that we make a sacrifice on an altar to a god, or to an idea, to a value, to an ideal. And I think that really helps me unpack this last moment, that there are multiple sacrifices there, right? Anakin has to lose Ahsoka to learn a lesson here. And that is something that is tragic and is awful. And I completely agree with both of you. She's dead, right? Like Rey at the end of Rise of Skywalker. It's like, no, she's gone. Like, and the fact that Anakin, the sacrifice was required for Anakin to learn the lesson. And then the daughter can act to make a sacrifice to bring her back. And that doesn't undo the lesson because Anakin experienced the loss and Ahsoka experienced the death, but it also teaches us another lesson. So then the question for me becomes, what's the value? What is the value that they're all learning to? And I think we have to point to the fortune cookie and to remember that you can choose hope, that you can choose to live for a reason and to have hope that you can do good in this universe and to continue on. And the daughter chooses to have hope that her death can mean something if she puts goodness and light back in the universe. And that is Ahsoka's return. And Anakin has learned that, you know, I think this guy Anakin has attachment problems. I don't know. It's come up once or twice here and there. And so I think he has to learn that, you know, to have hope is actually to let go of your attachments sometimes and to see that. And that doesn't mean surrendering your life as the fortune cookie suggested, but it means to embrace hope. And the Jedi will give him that same lesson. Yoda will say that in Revenge of the Sith in exactly a way that he shouldn't. That means nothing. It just sounds like dogma and empty Jedi wisdom. But there is a truth to it in the light side that, you know, that if we really believe in what we believe, then loss and you know, separation doesn't matter in the world of the Force.
And everything that you're saying is, both of you so beautifully said, of course. Again, it's never an accident. Well, when I think of people who will be great to help me understand these episodes and explain it with me, I mean, you two are phenomenal. So thank you, just as an aside for what you're saying, because it is helping me unpack this as well. I looked at this and I actually paused it at the scene where the daughter is on one side, Ahsoka's on another. They're both floating. Anakin is kneeling down. His eyes are up, as if to the heavens. His hands are out, down, facing the ground. And then above him, the father has got his hands outstretched. And this is a massive Christian metaphor here, but the father has his hands outstretched like Christ on the cross, maybe representing the New Testament, the Old Testament representing the daughter down below as the sacrifice from the knife itself. And then they're shaped, if you pause it, they're shaped like a triangle. They're shaped like a trinity. It's amazing. It's amazing. And it's probably happenstance, but maybe it isn't. But, you know, when you teach English or whatever, you find a lot of connections that drive a lot of people who are more into quantitative data crazy. And I'm very at peace with that. So I think it's really, really cool because this is an idea, you know, the father is the middle, but he is also standing above Anakin. So his hands are up, Anakin's hands are down. It's almost like they're a perfect little statue. And then he is the one who brings balance to the Force. So Ahsoka is the dark side of the Force because there's death there. Mm-hmm. The daughter is the light. She is the good side. So as the balance of the Force, he is the conduit because the Force, again, is an energy field, first and foremost, created by all living things. So he transmits that energy. He's the conduit. He's the catalyst to connect those two ideas because, you know, like you both said, she can just go over and tap her and boom, comes back. But no, it has to be Anakin that does it. Also, again, making us fully understand that the daughter is now truly inseparable from Ahsoka. And boy, oh boy, it's hard not. Well, I'm not going to break my own cardinal rule here of this, but it's really, really powerful. I've said this a lot too, so I also say a lot that I say things a lot. Oh well, I guess here we are. Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that this episode truly truly, I think, and I'm assuming the two of you will agree with me on this. I think this is one of the most profound, challenging, allegorical pieces of storytelling ever done in the world of Star Wars. We are not trying to find connections that aren't there to fill up space on a podcast. This really is some complicated stuff that does not have easy answers, and I hope we never get them. I really do. But I feel like the two of you have helped me kind of come close to understanding what's going on here.
Can I just put like a quick dot on this specific scene that we're talking about? Number one, visual storytelling, right? The importance of what you just very well eloquently said. They could have done it in any way, and they did it. And it also goes back to the same type of visuals from the first episode where he has his test and he's holding up the brother and the daughter and the son. Again, light on one side, dark on the other, Anakin in the middle. It's just reinforcing that whole balance. But there's also more of a micro level that, Greg, when you were talking, made me think all the way back in the beginning of this episode. Anakin is ultra motivated to go after Ahsoka. He hasn't learned that lesson, right, about letting go, and he really never does he, until the end of Return of the Jedi. But Obi-Wan is saying, no, you're falling into a trap. The son wants to separate us. He wants to divide us. We need to go find the father. He'll know what to do. Let's stick together. And Anakin says this. He goes, no, I have to go save Ahsoka. It's my fault. And that she got taken. And it made me think of the guilt conversation that you had, Dan, last episode about this arc, which he's still fighting that guilt. He feels guilty that he lost Ahsoka. He has to go get her back. And now, fast forward to the end of the episode, he has lost her. She's gone. And that's when he delivers that really on-the-nose line, which I think is great. He says, there is always hope. And that's when we sort of see this beautiful visual storytelling ushered in that you were talking about.
If this was the Anakin that faced off against Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith, I don't think he turns to Vader. I really don't. He's the most centered and grounded. When he loses Ahsoka, he could just go ballistic and just fully engage his core, potential tendencies, and he doesn't. And it's just, I think Mortis helps us to love Anakin more. It also makes it more tragic when he does fall, because, again, as we know from Kanan Jarrus, Luke Skywalker, just being human beings, you can learn the best lessons, but because we are human, we fall and have to learn them again. It just makes this much more tragic.
I'm not going to break the rule and talk about the next episode, but I will say what this conversation has done is, I think I really enjoyed Ahsoka, but I think on average I'm like one letter grade cooler than most Star Wars fans seem to be, and that's no shame on the creatives on it. But this conversation has made me think, as you just said, Dan, like this is the richest storytelling we probably ever saw in Star Wars. And it is Dave, and as my comments tonight probably show, I think it's a lot of George. George was on his way. He was getting ready to retire, and he said, I've got a few more things that I've always thought about that I want to put in play before I go. And so I can absolutely see why Dave would take the opportunity to come back to this. And boy, the dangling end of the new Ahsoka show, where we're seeing that we're going to come back, and I'm sure why we're talking about these episodes on CWK is to really prepare and think about what could they do here. And I leave this conversation charged with Star Wars is going to keep telling amazing stories, and it's going to challenge me. And Star Wars for me is at its best when it's challenging and it's not all superficial whiz bang pew pew. I mean, that's great too, but it's great when it really challenges us, and it makes me more excited for Ahsoka. And I think we're gonna have a long wait till that story continues, but I'm very excited for when it does.
I am too. I think that is a great place to end the main part of this conversation. Let's go ahead and give letter grades, and any last minute things you want to add on to this conversation? I almost said to Ahsoka. I wish Ahsoka's last episode was as profound as this one, but Colby, go ahead. Letter grade and any last minute thoughts.
I will start by saying I'd love to have an oral history of this arc, just from the pitch meeting, just through the development. You see every so often you'll see a really good comprehensive article about an episode of television or a movie and how it all came about. I would love to know more about when George walked in the conference room that day and said, I got an idea for you guys. Right. I don't know if we'll ever get it, but anyway, one can hope. I'm going to give it an A+. And as many times, I upgraded it after our conversation, because at face value, I started out our conversation saying that this is a good bridge from the first episode to the third episode, but there's so much more. It's a very ornate bridge. Like, this is a beautiful bridge. If we're going to be on this bridge, it's amazing because of the thoughts expressed through this conversation. I was going to go with an A, but I'm going with an A+. So again, thank you for helping me to give that upgrade.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for teaching us about this episode. Greg, what about you? I'm really interested. Are you like your cohort Jen, who just will not give A pluses no matter what?
When I was first a teacher, I showed up on a website called Rate My Professor, which I'm sure nobody knows exists. And definitely that's not what professors do in the break room, is go over their Rate My Professor reviews. But I had one for years, and it was only one. And it said, really great guy, really supportive, but man, you have to work hard to get an A. And I was like, done. I don't want any other reviews.
Yeah.
If that's my reputation, that's exactly what I want.
Absolutely.
It was a negative rating, but it was exactly the message I wanted out there. So I think I'm gonna fall into what you suspect. I'm gonna go B+. And I will say I like Colby. I'm leaving this conversation more positive. But it's something about it that I'm so challenged by, which again, I agree, I do enjoy. But the fact I want like 10% more that I really understand to kind of get to the A level. It's just, I still feel a little adrift here. And I think that's what they want me to feel. I think it's all intentional, but it just feels a little too abstract for me. And some deeply literal part of my brain is like, yes, but what happened? And I know it was invoked on, I believe, both your shows and our show during Ahsoka, the Dumbledore line from King's Cross Station. Like, just because it happened in your head doesn't mean it wasn't real. And I think that's the only answer there. But I'm going to go B+. My one extra little bit I just want to shout out. I will say the Captain America of the CWK Avengers, the Dear Mary Purdue, put me on to the visual symbols of the daughter and the son. And I was spending my whole time in the last in these two episodes tracking those two symbols. The daughter has a very rounded symbol and the son a very jagged, spiky one. And the windows and the floors, they use these symbols, and sometimes they are balanced, that they're the same size. Other times the sun symbol is kind of enveloping the daughter symbol. And I could be wrong, but I swear the headgear Ahsoka gets when she wakes up halfway through her new season, or her new series, is a symbol very reminiscent of what we see for the daughter. So Colby asked for a history of these episodes. I want a history, somebody to track all those symbols across all their appearances. Mary found it in Ilum, I think. So maybe this is her project, a good retirement project for Mary. She can spend the year tracking those and informing us all.
And she's an educator too, so perfect. Yeah. So yeah, those symbols are there. I actually one of our listeners, whose name escapes me, I apologize, talked about the differences in kind of the pluses and the minuses of these symbols and how they combine together for the fathers. Pretty cool, by the way, when the father's laying down and on that stone, that he's perfectly in the center, and you can see that it looks like he's got wings that are etched into it. So he's almost got wings as well, but he doesn't transform into a beast form. This one is tough because the first time I watched these 3 years and years ago, the first episode was my least favorite. Now it's my favorite, and I gave that one an A+. So this is not an A+, mostly because it's so dark and depressing, and that's not a bad thing. It's an excellent way to tell a story, and the pathos of this is very, very rich. I was very engrossed in it. But I liked it, and I wouldn't say I appreciated it more because of the three of us talking about it, and it just sparked these different ideas. There's a lot of Christian symbolism in here, and I'm going to be biased because I am Christian, and that's okay. But there's a lot of other Eastern religions and philosophies that are intact too, which you always see in the Force. One of the things I've always liked about George is that he combines a lot. The Force, first of all, is fake. Sorry, but it is. But the Force combines a lot of different religions, a lot of different ideas about what it means to be good, about what it means to be true, about what it means to care about others, and what it means when you go the opposite path to that. And I feel like it opened up a lot of conversations. So I'll give it an A because all the questions it asks, again, I feel like we throw that around a lot, but this really does have so many more questions than it does answers. There's nothing simple about this one. The only reason I'm not giving it an A+ is because I like the first one a little bit better.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is... yes.
We've got one more left. I cannot tell you how much I'm enjoying going through these Coffee with Kenobi style, and having the two of you on really was so illuminating, and I just could not be happier. Colby, as always, you continue to just bring so much insight and joy into the conversation with the Colby Cast. Please let us know what is going on with the Colby Cast and where people can find it, as well as you.
Well, thanks again, Dan. I love being on Coffee with Kenobi. You're the reason I have a podcast. This is where it all began. And so many people that I have met, wonderful people like Dr. Cass, and so many more that I could sit here and name off, Ross and Mary and Greg, all these guys. It's because of you, Dan. So I appreciate your friendship and always. I spent all day watching this stuff and reading. I have my Star Wars book right over here. I think you may have heard of it. It's a great resource. So anyway, I always love joining the conversation. So thank you for having me. You mentioned the Colby Cast. My sons and I, Caleb and Luke, we like to put smiles on faces. We talk about a lot of Star Wars. We talk about Marvel, pop culture, and storytelling. That's where we live. Last episode, we spent about 20 minutes talking about the new Beatles song because, that's what we do. So you can find us on all of it except Facebook and TikTok. For some reason, I haven't gotten around to doing that. But all the rest of the socials, X, Instagram, Threads, Hive, and even Bluesky now at the Colby Cast. So check us out. We would appreciate having you.
Well, the fun aspect is true. You do bring a lot of fun. And thank you so much for your kind words. Truly appreciate it. Greg, you are also someone that is pretty much ubiquitous in fandom. And I think we're better for it for having the both of you there. Please let us know about your Substack, about the work you're doing with Jen. And of course, that other Greg that is floating out there somewhere on top of a Purgill having the time of his life.
Oh, absolutely. Well, echo to your my thanks for having me on again. I will say I had a fantastic summer, but the one devastating thing that happened is I was asked on for Indiana Jones, and we couldn't make the schedule work. And I've been just moping around the house ever since. So it was great to be able to say yes to this one and dive in. So thank you very much. Yes, the place, I'm bopping around a lot of podcasts. I'm a professional podcast guest. And so I'm on the Rebel Base card feed. Greg is still threatening that we're going to do at least 3 season recaps on Ahsoka. He has guests lined up. I know he had some personal travel, but people can find me on those shows. And those are on Rebel Base Card, which is also just great to follow if you like trading card information. And then I've been pretty much weekly on Jen's podcast, which is the Long Take Review podcast. We recorded last night on the Holdovers, which I kind of accidentally went to the premiere of, and it's a good story, and it's on the podcast. I'll leave that out there. And we recorded the week before, or 2 weeks before that, on Killers of the Flower Moon, and next week on the Marvels. So if people are out there wanting to hear Jen and I talk about movies, we're having a great time doing that. And finally, my writing is on ioncanon.substack.com. And I have a great, well, I'll call it great because nobody else has read it, so I feel fantastic about it. A great new blog post this week celebrating the arrival of Phase 3 of the High Republic and kind of contemplating what maybe live action Star Wars can learn from the High Republic Initiative. Oh, look at that. That's Dan's holding up the book, and I think he's going to read it to Colby and I for the next hour.
I am. Buckle up. A huge thank you to Greg and Colby for joining me as we talk about the second episode, Altar of Mortis. I learned so much from these conversations, and I hope you are enjoying them and kind of looking at things a little bit differently as well. That's, again, what's so great about the rhetoric and the conversations here at Coffee with Kenobi, or really any podcast or blog that you enjoy, to learn these different perspectives about this galaxy far, far away. If you like more writing and conversation about Star Wars, of course, go to coffeewithkenobi.com for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, videos, and so much more. The official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi is MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. Please go to coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefan-travel for a no-cost, no-obligation quote. They can help you plan your magical vacation to all things Disney, including the East and West Coast homes of Galaxy's Edge, which are, of course, Walt Disney World and Disneyland. They can also help you book that Disney cruise and do all the things that go into what can be sometimes daunting, that is a Walt Disney World or Disneyland vacation. They will help you make things as smooth as possible and give you that peace of mind we all appreciate when planning our family vacations. Coffee with Kenobi is live every Tuesday night at coffeewithkenobi.com/CWK live at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. Get your top 5 list ready to talk about the third episode of Mortis. That is Ghosts of Mortis. Looking forward to that. Again, get your top 5 list ready. You're always invited to join me at 7 o'clock p.m. at coffeewithkenobi.com/live on Tuesdays. If you want to talk about things Star Wars related online, go to the Facebook group, the CWK Cafe, at coffeewithkenobi.com/community for Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-friendly, spoiler, and drama-free place. This week on CWK Pour-Over, we talk about the fifth episode of the classic 1984-1985 Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars comic books. Every week we talk about different pop culture topics, and you are invited to be a part of that conversation, but the only way to do that is if you are a member of the CWK Alliance. Thanks to you, the podcast, CWK Live, event coverage, and so much more is able to come to life. Find out how you can help this show for as little as $1 a month by joining the CWK Alliance, and you will receive access to CWK Pour-Over. That is our exclusive weekly audio and video podcast not heard anywhere else. You can go to coffeewithkenobi.com/CWK Alliance to find out more, or you can just go onto Spotify and search for CWK Pour-Over, and you can join the Alliance there as well. And 10% of your monthly contributions to the CWK Alliance go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital. Feel free to email me anytime at danzy@coffeewithkenobi.com. You can connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zaire, MRZEHR, on Instagram at DanZaireCWK, and on LinkedIn. Coffee with Kenobi is on social media like X, Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok. You can give the show a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, or subscribe to Coffee with Kenobi's YouTube channel, where you can find access to over 700 videos, past live shows and events, and this podcast. Please, if you have a moment, take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. If you would like a Coffee with Kenobi hoodie, coffee mug, laptop cover, or t-shirt, please check out coffeewithkenobi.com/shop. And finally, if you are starting a podcast or a blog or want to expand on your brand, go to danzymedia.com and I will gladly help you get that process started. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. I want to thank all of you for joining me every week for a virtual cup of coffee, whether it's here or the live show, or maybe even both. I truly appreciate your time and look forward to the next opportunity to talk Star Wars with all of you. I'm Dan Zaire, reminding you that this is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.